Okay, then this is our special call design review committee of April 26th. So we'll have a roll call as I call the meeting to order. Susan Besser. I see her. She's muted, but I see her.
She's here.
I see her. Brian Laster.
Here.
Nick Mann. Nick Mann is not. Okay, Lisa Marquardt.
Here.
Mary Pierce. Okay, Ken Scalf.
Present.
Kathy Worthington. I saw her.
She's here.
Yeah, she's here. All right, then need to entertain a motion to approve resolution 2021-77, resolution declaring that the Historic Zoning Design Review Committee shall meet for a special call meeting on April 26, 2021, and conduct its essential business by electronic means rather than being required to gather a quorum of the members physically present in the same location, because it is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of COVID-19. Is there such a motion?
So moved. This is Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. Second? Anyone?
I
Kathy?
second.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. Okay, let's vote here. Susan Besser,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Ken Scalf,
Aye.
Kathy Worthington,
Aye.
and Jim Roberts. Aye. Due to the COVID-19 outbreak, the meeting will be a virtual meeting. The purpose of the meeting will be to conduct a design review workshop. No decisions on applications will be made at the meeting. The public may call into the conference meeting to listen at 312-626-6799, meeting ID 949-2060-6600, passcode 408863. Public may email comments to planningintake@franklintn.gov to be provided in full to the commission and included the minutes, but not read aloud in their entirety during the meeting. Email comments will be accepted until 4 o'clock on the day before the meeting. The meeting video will be available for public viewing 24 hours following the meeting on the City of Franklin YouTube account. Now, I think we have some announcements. Kelly Danielsfelter.
Thank you. The governor's executive order that has allowed us to have virtual meetings due to COVID is set to expire this week. So we are anticipating that we're going to be transitioning back to in-person meetings the month of May. And we'll keep you apprised of the details as we work through in coordination with the CDC guidelines for a safe meeting to take place in May. Some things that we already have in place are plexiglass between the seats on the dais, and we will have spacing and working out how the seating for the applicants and the citizens and staff. So we'll be working through that process, but just know that we are anticipating that change in the next month, and we'll keep you apprised as we know more.
Okay, any other announcements? Amanda, have you got anything?
We are having our regular Historic Zoning Commission meeting on May the 10th, and that will likely be in person, as Kelly just mentioned. And then we also have a regular Design Review Committee meeting on the 17th, a special DRC meeting on the 18th for Harlan-Stell Farm. I just mentioned that to you guys momentarily ago. And then we also have a City Hall special meeting on the 24th. That'll be on site at City Hall. That should be pretty exciting. We want to get your feedback early and often on building form and placement. So we'll send you more details on those. I apologize. There are so many dates in May, but we promise we'll give you a long break over the summer.
Amanda, will design review be in that training room or in the board room?
We will still work, we're going to work through those details on where
fine.
it makes the most sense to have us, given spacing.
Okay, all right. Okay, then the DRC is the subcommittee of historic zoning. The meeting is informal, has been called to provide guidance to staff as we continue to work on the ongoing historic district design guideline update. Staff will be presenting information about additions today for committee feedback. And the one and only item is discussion of infield construction as it relates to the historic district design guidelines update. So Amanda, the show is yours.
Thank you very much, everybody. I am going to share screen. Just a moment. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so just a general overview. We have met a few times in the past to talk about the design guidelines update and the City Hall update. We are talking about infrastructure or construction today, and next month, our special DRC meeting will be specific to City Hall. And we'll get you out there on site looking at the block faces and building form and orientation. So we want to be very mindful of your time. I know in the past we've mentioned trying to keep this in an hour, and we're very serious about that today. So Kelly will be our official timekeeper to keep us on task to get through this, because I know that we've spent a lot of time with you guys lately, and we'll make sure we get you out of here when we said we would. So our topics today will be on building step backs. We'll also talk about spacing and setbacks between new buildings. A newer phenomenon we've seen is folks increasing upper level space, floor space by cantilevering over porch areas. We want to talk to you guys about that and see what your thoughts are on that. Dormers for residential buildings, whether they are houses or garages, and then also building canopies for new construction in the commercial areas. So starting out, this is building step backs. We have a building here that, is a typical, infill brick form that you may see in a historic area. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the fourth story step back, what we're calling a step back, that's recessed from the front and side facades of this building. Feel free to jump in, and we'll take down your thoughts on that.
This is Ken. I think it's an effective way to reduce the appearance of the mass, because at street level, I mean, this perspective is on the other side of the street. Mostly at street level, especially a narrower street, you would never see the upper penthouse, we'll call it, because it's changing color and it's setback.
So the change in color to you is one that helps break up the mass?
Yes.
This is
Thank you, Ken.
Lisa. I was thinking that it actually appears more massive because of the change in brick color. And just in general, it seems that the mass could have been minimized if different materials had been used rather than brick. The windows are good, but the brick, I believe, adds to the mass.
So Lisa, to further understand your comment, do you mean brick on the overall building, or just the use of brick on this step back could have been changed to something else?
Just the step back.
Okay.
I agree with that. That if it was something other than masonry, that might help even more.
Now, in the downtown area, there are some requirements in our zoning ordinance for the use of materials. They are largely masonry. Is there, what are your comments recommending that it maybe be a different type of masonry, or even just using framing? Just kind of getting a sense of what you mean.
I mean,
Amanda, this is Brian.
Brian, I heard you say this is Brian, but I can't hear anything after that.
Yes, I was thinking more. It's the color. It's the light color on top of the darker red building that really stands out. And I'm wondering, well, how much of a setback is that from the main facade of the building?
This is not something I know. I did find this visual online, and I don't have the specifications for the building on hand.
I can guess that it's a bay depth at about 25 feet.
On the front side, correct?
That's right. The
Okay.
the side looks closer.
Yes.
The only thing, the appearance of it just kind of looks like one story was just set on top of the other. And I think the light color probably exasperates that. I'd like to see a larger setback.
Okay, thank you.
And if it were framing, do we have an example of that or no?
I don't have an example to show you of that. That's probably not something our zoning ordinance would support as written currently.
Okay.
I really think the framing would be a bad idea. I concur with the ones, I think the setback is better on the front, and the side street is really just as important. It's a high priority street too, so if there had been more setback on the side. But I think this is actually a pretty good compromise to accommodate modern development in a historic district and keep our town from looking like we have some buildings popped up.
So a third story with the fourth recess, like having that fourth internal to the block where you don't experience it as fully or maybe don't experience it at all would be acceptable in some circumstances.
Well, I would like to hear what Ken thinks, but I think that, and I think if it were internal to the street, then the side setback wouldn't become quite as important.
Okay. That's
I
a
was
good
going to
point.
say, if it were a firewall adjacent to another building, like a lot of ours are downtown, then I don't think the setback on the side's necessary. But if it's a side street, it should probably match the other street.
That's my thought. And I concur with what everybody said about the lighter color doesn't do us a favor.
Okay.
But I do think some type of masonry material.
Okay.
So I have pulled up the Harpeth Hotel. Now, how did that all turn out? Because the rendering I showed shows a lighter color on the top floor. Is
I
that
can
what-
barely hear you, Susan. You
Yeah,
sound
I can barely hear.
You're very far away from the screen.
I have to be. That's the only way I can tolerate Zoom right now.
Okay.
All right, I've pulled up Harpeth Square, the rendering, and the top floor of that is set back and it is a lighter color. Now, is that what they actually did?
Yes, that it is. It's a lighter color. It's a lighter color and it's set back. And when you're driving by or you're walking by, you really don't, you're not, your eyes are not drawn to it. That's what Ken was saying about this perspective when in his first comments. If you're walking by this building that Amanda's pulled up, or you're driving by it perhaps in the front, I don't think you would notice this as much as you do from this angle. So I think the concept, the step back is a good concept. And we can debate finishes and all that, but the concept of a step back is a good idea, I think.
I think that's what everybody's saying.
Yes, I do too.
I think it's one way to look at this is look at the lower mass. Let's just assume it's not, but let's assume that it is an existing historic building that's being rehabbed, and this was proposed on top, or it's a new development that is built to appear that way.
Yep, good comment.
Right. And to Susan
So
Besser's
basi-
comment, what was approved and built out at Harpeth does have a lighter color. So I would encourage you all to go look at that. And if you have any different thoughts about what you've already shared today after seeing that, definitely let me know. We'd love to hear those. We just would like to
Okay.
get a sense of how effective some of these treatments are in mitigating mass and height.
Okay, I want to bring up the building that Parks used to be in on Main Street. That's a one-story building. So is anyone what I'm hearing is that you could do this on an existing building. Are you going to let them go up 2 stories?
I'm not asking that at all, Ms. Pierce. I was just asking about infill construction.
No, but I think this needs to contemplate that there would be 1-story buildings. If this is allowed on historic buildings, there would be 1-story buildings come forward that might want 2 stories.
Right, that's a good point. And our historic district design guidelines right now would recommend that, additions be on, ground levels where possible. And if anything's proposed on the top, it would not be visible from the street from like a mile radius, I think it says. So,
Okay.
so if that's something that we'd like to see changed, I would love to hear your feedback
I
on that.
don't want to see that change personally.
Okay. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that point Ms. Pierce made?
I would agree with her comments on that.
Okay. And I can reshare screen. I know we're getting a little short on time for this topic, but did I share a screen that shows the Harpeth Hotel?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see that there is a lighter color on this recessed fourth floor. And this is at the intersection of First and Main Street. Is that helpful?
I think so, because we went through that when we considered that project, and that
Right.
step
Thank
back
you,
was what
Anita.
that's what we okayed.
It's a precedence.
And our ordinance today would require a 20-foot building step back versus what we see here on the side, which may be more like 8 or so. So it would actually require a larger step back on a 4th floor.
Right, on
What
both
is that?
sides.
What's that front step back? Do you remember?
From here to here or from here to here?
From there to there, that right there.
I don't recall. I'd have to look it up.
It looks more than 20 feet, but I'm just guessing.
Yes, that one's more than 20 feet. This one is probably, max 10, if that.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that it's 10.
And the front might be 40 feet.
It's very sizable. This would be larger, I believe, than what the zoning ordinance requires on a corner, but this side is definitely not meeting that current requirement.
And this is a little different than the first photograph we were shown,
Yes.
which just looks like another box on top of a box. And you don't actually have that here.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the previous screen.
And we've hit our 10 minutes, but I think we have good feedback on this one if you want to head to the next one.
Yeah, zip on.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. All right, so the next topic is talking about the spacing and setbacks between new buildings. And so what I wanted to achieve here is to kind of show you 2 different contexts we're all familiar with in downtown. So this first photograph is a panorama view of the 400 block of Main Street. As you can see, all the buildings are sitting on the sidewalk. Some have alcoves, some don't, but all in all, they have 0 space between them, and they have a form that's very vertical with the terms, with the separation between the upper and lower facades, and then they're very horizontal with those breaks as well. You can also see it here with this photograph. You see it more from a street view. Now, the next context we also see downtown, where buildings may be anticipated at some point in time, would be at one of our side streets. So a lot of our number streets have a mix of commercial forms and residential forms, or they're just strictly all residential forms and they have commercial uses. So this particular aerial that you see is an oblique view of 2nd Avenue North across from the hotel. You see at the far end at Main Street is a historic structure, and at the anchoring it at the other end is a historic structure at 2nd and Bridge Street. So the reason I wanted to show you this is to kind of get an idea from both for both contexts from you all how much space, if any, in terms of setbacks, front yard, side yard, should be considered if there are new buildings contemplated on blocks that look like this and blocks that look like this. And I'm happy to toggle through.
So this is just initially a thought, is that if you toggle back to Main Street, the idea of trying to me, that looks like that's history right there.
Right.
Part of the history is no space between the buildings. And to try to replicate that in some modern infill form, I believe would be a mistake.
Okay, so is your statement saying that if somebody wanted to do that through here, it would be trying to replicate something historic in a false way?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Mhm.
Okay, thank you for that.
I agree with that. I think that you can't, you know, if you duplicate or mimic the downtown district that, you know, is that scenario where there's shotgun spaces, then it kind of waters down the significance of the historic part.
I appreciate that comment. I mean, and you know, this street has historic buildings as well, and you know, to do something different than that may be contrary to it.
Amanda, this is Brian. I agree with Ken and Lisa on this one. But I did want to ask the question, so would we be considering infill? We're not considering really they're just demolishing buildings and trying to replicate Main Street. This is more of an infill.
Yes, you're cutting out a little bit on my end. I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but I think your question was if somebody wanted to consider infill here, is that what I'm asking? Yes, we're not presupposing that any historic buildings would be removed. And of course, any demolition would be reviewed by the Historic Zoning Commission. But in the case of the block you see on the street, we haven't received any sort of request about it. That's, you know, this is all hypothetical, theoretical, in relating and thinking ahead about our guidelines. If somebody wanted to seek redevelopment in this area, there may be some potential. And so just getting a sense of what would be the most appropriate context for this type of redevelopment location versus this type of redevelopment location. Namely, you know, to be more specific about it, you know, we are thinking that buildings should, in any situation, whether it's here or if there was a tooth missing here, buildings that are added should be spaced according to the historic precedent established on that same block face. And then if there is no precedent established, like some of our block faces don't have historic buildings, then they would need to look to across the street for that, if possible.
My concern about duplicating those existing facades is that's all it would be, because those shotgun spaces do not accommodate modern uses. So it would end up being a facade that was open behind, where the usage of the interior wouldn't reflect what the exterior was indicating.
Okay.
Right.
I think whatever our guidelines are saying now, it's really been serving us pretty well.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that there from Ms. Pierce, and you know, it's slightly different than what I think others might be saying, is that the side streets that already have spacing between the buildings don't necessarily need space between the buildings.
What?
Well, what was built across the street does not replicate what was there historically in terms of spacing and setbacks. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
Well, I'm thinking about the building across from the boathouse. And it has more of a setback. and it isn't built to replicate a Main Street building. But that's probably, that and the hotel are as ground covering as we've gotten. Isn't that true on a infill? So if
Yes, I believe so.
To me, those are the two we have to think, well, they were what we're done with our present guidelines. Are we happy with those? And if we're not, what would we have to do to be happy?
In a situation like this, where you've got a piece of property within the metes and bounds of that piece of property, whatever the function is of that building that's going to be built there should drive the form, and then we reflect on the facade relative to fitting in and meeting the guidelines.
And the massing.
Agreed.
I'd like to add something too about the slide that's up right now. The properties with all the additional spacing, and it like leads to parking and such. Any infill in those, if it happens as a 1-by-1 approach on each building, I think what's been talked about is very appropriate to review it as a 1-by-1. But let's say someone scoops up those 3 buildings in between the historic structure, both historic structures, and maybe even a 4th building, and they look at it as a one entity type of building where it becomes infills between the 2 historic structures. Then I think we need to look at that for what is presented, whether or not the massing on it, the infill in it really works with the 2 historical properties as well. So I think it's going to need to be as per each infill is, comes before us.
And Kathy, I think that what you mentioned, just said, is exactly what I was trying to ask is, piece by piece, it's very direct and understandable on how to approach it. But when you have multiple lots that are grouped together for the purpose of infill, should that particular building reflect a form more similar to what you already see historically with, space between buildings, even if it is all one building, but have, insets and offsets from the front property line, or if it should, reflect a more of a Main Street context like this?
I would think it needs to not reflect more of a Main Street context, but particular to that building, and then also the function of things like accessibility, parking, those kind of aspects as well. But it wouldn't have to necessarily reflect our Main Street facade.
Okay, thank you.
So Amanda, this is Brian. What change would have to happen to the guidelines for what we're being asked about now?
And what is staff's input on this? That's what I am interested in hearing too.
Well, I think, thank you, Brian and Jim, for that. I do think, as many of you have said, that there is clearly a Main Street context, and then we have a side street context in our downtown area. Historically, the side streets have buildings that are individual with space between them. Now, this may not be the most representative block of what we've had historically, because there only are 2 buildings anchoring it. But the reason I show it is because there are only 2 buildings that are historic anchoring it, because that means that any of the buildings in between could be subject to demolition if so requested by an applicant. So with that, there could be, there's just the question of how do we want this form to reflect? Should we have a building wall that's solid that goes all the way across like you do see on a Main Street Forum? And sure, it may have vertical breaks with different facades, but is that appropriate here? And that's sort of what I'm trying to ask. And as far as staff's recommendation, I do think that we want to be more mindful of our side streets having a different context historically than our Main Street Forum. I don't think that there's anything negative or wrong with anything that the commission has been party to in the past. It's just more of moving forward as we anticipate redevelopment proposals. Maybe there's an opportunity to think about these a little bit more distinctly and not treat the whole downtown as an urban streetscape, but treat Main Street as a more urban streetscape, and then the rest of downtown as a secondary urban streetscape. Is that helpful?
With that said, if we decided that that was the thing to do, we're gonna have to have some respect for Dr. McPhail's office and some respect for the historic home on the corner.
Yes, definitely.
So I don't know how I can understand the idea of those being more to match the old First Tennessee Bank building. But then when I say that, there's still going to have to be some respect for the historic pieces. And I don't know guidelines, Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda laid it out well. I think we're looking to add a little bit more context into the guidelines that isn't quite there today. Just to add a little bit more specificity on where the context of a new building would be in relation to what that existing pattern is on the street today.
I think the more context, the better. The guidelines, I think, do a pretty good job of emphasizing context, but if you think that there's a way to bring it even more to the forefront and being more specific about that, because I know context, that's a big picture thing.
Right.
So if there's a way to narrow it down, that's not a bad idea.
I don't know how we are on time with this particular one, but I do think this one's a very important topic. Just to be a little bit more clear on where staff is thinking is that, Ms. Pierce mentioned the building that was constructed at First and Main across from Americana Tap House. In my opinion, that is mimicking a Main Street urban form in the sense that it has vertical divisions and horizontal divisions. It may not be reflective in the sense that there's a lot of variety between the different brick colors, or that the vertical and horizontal divisions are as regular as you see here. But I do believe that its intent was to be similar in context to this form. I know it wasn't, I don't think anyone would look at it and think it was historic because it was done in a way so that people were clear that it's not in other ways other than form.
But it fits back further, Amanda.
Yes, but my question is, would that form that was built on First and Main be appropriate here? Or should it not be appropriate here?
Well, again, if you look at context, the historic properties that surround those potentially proposed redevelopment sites would not, I think, would conflict with something as what we see on Main and First.
I agree with that. I think that's a good way to look at it, Lisa. And I think it would conflict with those historic properties. If these three buildings, the chiropractor, Winchester Antique, and I think that's Schuff's.
And this is a non-historic too, yes.
All right, but anyway, all of that, I think it would, if we're just looking at the two on the corner, the two historic properties, which we are, that's what your errors show. I think a mass there would conflict with those two historic structures. So, but again, all of this is going to depend on what the design looks like. I don't, we're just talking very hypothetically right here.
Right, right. And
I
I'm
would
sorry.
hate to see I would hate to see another mass across the street from the Harpeth, from the hotel, to fill up the area between these two historic structures on the opposite side of the street. Just,
I concur.
but it doesn't feel right. It does, and that's too nebulous. But it just doesn't feel right to me.
Well, I think I've got a pulse on what you guys are thinking. It took me a little longer to explain it. Maybe the best way to explain it was exactly what I just said at the end. So does anyone have anything else to share before I move on to that next topic?
Can I comment on that, Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't there a height that's specified for these transition areas? Isn't it, is it 4 stories though?
The zoning ordinance will allow for 3 stories by right.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Yes, and then to add on to that, if there is larger block redevelopment, Envision Franklin does allow for a recessed 4th story, but that would involve a full rezoning and development plan application for that.
But if you have a historic structure and then you're going to shoot up 3 stories with a recessed 4th story and you got a Victorian house, it will never look right. It's not going to work. And I'm not sure that I think being more specific is our friend.
That's not anticipated by the guidelines today, nor would it be with the update. We're only talking about new buildings right now, only new construction,
All right.
not additions to.
I'm
historic
talking
ones.
about if you tore down the Chef's building, went up 3 stories with a recessed 4th story, it would never work successfully.
All right. Well, let me just read what number 16 says on page 109 of infill buildings. The height of new construction should be compatible with the existing buildings on the same block face. Compatibility is generally achieved by building to within 10% above or below the average height of the historic buildings on the same block face on the same side of the street. I mean, that's the way it reads now. So should that be changed? I mean, I don't think that should be changed.
I don't either.
Okay, well, that would apply to both residential and non-residential form
Well, but this is,
construction.
okay, it might, but this is in the commercial section, the
Right,
non-residential guidelines. I'm
Right.
just reading that. I'm not, because I think we're talking about commercial primarily right here.
We are.
And this is an example where the design guidelines can be more restrictive than the zoning ordinance.
Right, and
And that's where we are.
this might need to be tweaked. I don't know. Using this example, I don't know what 10% more from the height of these two historic buildings would actually be.
Okay, well, I'll just be very candid and say what is across the street is not 10% higher than the residential form next to it. It is higher than that.
The unfortunate thing is this is commercial property and it is expensive property.
Yeah.
You could end up with nothing but surface parking lots at these
That's
buildings.
right. So I don't know that. I would like to say this paragraph 16 fits, but it may not fit in all situations. It doesn't fit necessarily in all situations. So I don't know the right answer.
I'll continue to work on some visuals that may be better able to assist you and, providing some feedback on the situation, and we'll get back to you on that. I realize now I probably should have given something more to be helpful. So we'll move on to the next item. We're going to talk about enclosed spaces on upper floors. So we've seen some scenarios where folks are, in the interest of, the price of property and trying to maintain, a 1.5 story appearance, have cantilevered space above a porch in order to get additional space. Now, in these examples I show here, they do that in the form of dormers. On the left side, this is a historic building, and it has a historically typical scaled dormer, very much a dormer, not a full second floor. On the right side of the screen, this is infill construction, not in Franklin, just a generic infill construction photograph. It shows a dormer as well, but it's significantly, larger in scale and height, and to me reads as a half story and not just a dormer. Okay, and then moving on to this photograph, you have more of the same. These are some photographs of infill development you see on the left. That is a full second floor cantilevered over the porch. And then on the right side, there is a cantilevered area over that porch. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about having enclosed spaces over front porches. In looking at the different types of architectural styles that we have historically in our historic district areas, it is not as common of a feature. In Craftsman, you do have some, dormer space, and the porch is inset underneath the slope of the porch, but it's not to the degree that you see in some of the other photographs. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I don't have any problems with conditioned space above the porch. And the two examples that you give here, I think are fine. You could probably criticize the one on the right some, but I think in an infill situation with a little tweaking, it would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
I think it depends on if it's infill in a historic district or just infill, say like Ledge Lawn or Fair Park or Benelli Park.
Like a new street.
I think the two houses that you show with the dormers are fine in a historic district. But when you get to the other two, I think that's more a form in an infill that is not a historic district.
Okay. So are you referring to new streets in a historic district, or you mean just in historic districts in general?
I'm talking in an existing historic district that you are on a primary street of a National Register district. The dormers, in my mind, are fine. Where the form cantilevers over the porch, I don't think we have that form in historic districts, and I wouldn't want to see it. Like if a house burns and you have to build another one back, we've had that happen. I think the two forms with the dormers are fine, but the other two, not so much. But the other two, if you were going in where it wasn't visible from the historic district, that's a different situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
So Mary, what you're saying is that these would be appropriate in a historic district on a new street that's not full of historic homes.
In a historic zoning overlay that's being built on a totally infill
Street.
project,
Okay.
but not fronting Fair Street or West Main Street or 4th Avenue or any of our historic streets.
Thank you, Mary.
I would concur with that. This is Susan.
Thank you, Susan. Any other thoughts? Okay, we'll go on to the next topic, which is dormers. So we've talked a little bit about dormers in the past. You gave me some really helpful feedback on dormers in general for additions on buildings. And so taking some of that feedback and moving forward, I'd like to get your feedback on the recommendations for both residential houses and residential outbuildings. So we have these on the screen. Set the dormer face back at least a foot from the wall below it. So it creates more of a half-story look. But the trim should be a simplified version of the house's trim. If this were to be a garage or a house, the trim would be, if it were a garage, it'd be a simplified version of the house. The dormer ridge would be, and I could see that this is not reflecting correctly, because I'm using the PDF instead of the PowerPoint. So the dormer ridge would actually be not this. It would be 1 foot lower than the roof ridge, kind of like you see here. That you would size and locate the dormers to fit with the architectural style and roof shape of the structure, so that you would have a roof form that's similar to the rest of the form. And that these cheek walls, which are the side walls of dormers, will be set back 2.5 feet from the side wall. What that does is it creates a dormer appearance instead of a half-story appearance. I'm going to share. I'm going to stop this share. I'm going to reshare some on my PowerPoint. Okay, can you all see the PowerPoint? That's showing it better. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about this?
I agree with all this. I think it's a good set of guidelines.
Thank you. The one thing I think might not have come across when writing these is the slope of the roof of the dormer. So there's been a lot of conversation with previous applicants about how much slope should be on a roof in order for it to feel like a dormer versus a second floor. So the further away you get a dormer from the main ridge of the structure, the further it sits down, which makes it feel like it's a dormer and not a half story, the same as you push it in here. But sometimes the further you get away, depending on the slope of the main body, there's a temptation to flatten the dormer's roof pitch to get more ceiling height there. So if you have any comments on what the slope of a dormer's roof should be in relation to that of the house, that would be helpful too. And that may be something that perhaps Ken or someone with some building experience might feel more comfortable talking about.
The pitch of the roof on the dormer obviously is going to drive the material selection, because anything less than a 3 and 12, you can't put asphalt shingles on. They won't work. And so you end up with a metal roof there.
And a metal roof always helps denote that it's a dormer as opposed to shingle, because it's a physical material change. However, like Ken said, anything that's 312 or more steep could have a shingle or a metal that's in keeping with what you see on the rest of the structure. The main point of this conversation today is to try to figure out guidelines that will help relay the commission's recommendations on how to create a half-story appearance as opposed to a 2-story appearance for accessories in particular, but also for principal structures, because there is a lot of request for scale incongruencies where there's a home that is perhaps a 1-story and someone's requesting a 1.5-story garage. It is never recommended by staff that the scale perception of a garage be more so than that of the house. So we are looking to try to give guidance to both you and to our citizens as they move forward with such request, so they can be more successful in bringing things forward.
I think what this is Susan, I think what we want to avoid is the roof pitch coming out on a very straight slope and really does come across as a second floor. So however, if we need to have a roof pitch in there to specify that, but I think that's what we're trying to avoid. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Amanda, this is
comments?
Kathy. Amanda, this is Kathy.
Yes.
The picture really does a good deal of explaining the guidelines and the approach that we want to take. What if you showed a picture of what not the shed roof needs to look like, where it would look too flat, that would not be acceptable?
That's a good comment. That's a good comment, Amanda.
Love it.
So show a good example and a bad example.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I really do like this visual, and it kind of kills a lot of birds with one stone. And so if we show the type of, without getting into the actual pitches, because we don't know the slope of the roof, to determine the slope, to put an actual slope on it, in spite of the fact of, we are limited with the 3/12 for change of material, but that might be easy.
And we are certainly working to develop a graphic similar to this one to use in our guidelines document. We're going to tweak it to be something that would work more specifically for our community, but the inspiration was from this. And I'm glad to hear that you're finding it very helpful and easy to read, because we certainly plan to do that. We can try to address the roof pitch a little bit more on our graphic if that's something that you feel strongly could help. It's a little difficult though, because the roof pitch depends so strongly on the architectural style of the building itself. And so when you're adding a dormer, the pitch needs to really relate to the pitch of the house or the garage on which it's situated. And sometimes calling that out in a guideline might be difficult to address all the different architectural scenarios you have. Okay, any other questions on this one? Comments? Okay, we got 5 minutes. I'm going to move on to our last topic, which is canopies. So this is a picture of the Franklin Theater's canopy. This is a replica of a historic canopy that was located on this building. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the cable style, which you see, I pointed out the cables with the yellow arrow there. So what would your thought be on a cable style canopy for a new commercial building? Or on the flip side of that, how would you feel about approving a cable style canopy on an existing historic building?
I personally think this is somewhat of an outlier.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That this particular style cable, I wouldn't want to see. If there is some historic reference on a building, in historic photographs that shows, Amanda, I'm thinking the old Standard Farm store. I can't remember if there's a cable there, but I think for this particular style cable, this actually went through the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I think this particular is an outlier.
Yeah, and I wanted to stress that this is a replica of a historic canopy that was on this building. So it's not that the reason it was requested the way that it is and it's approved now is because it was based on historical documentation.
That's right. And I believe that I've seen a couple of more dressing looking cable. I don't know if you call them cable, but you know, iron things that go back into the building, and it could be appropriate. It seems to me like maybe the standard farm store. Yeah, they're something.
Like this.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show you this too, because this is a cable style canopy on a new building. So that could give you a sense of what I'm talking about. And then here is a bracketed canopy. These are heavy brackets, but the difference, and I don't know that these are technical terms, but this is more of relaying it for the sense of how the structure, the canopy structure is attached to a building. And these are using cables or iron pieces that are emulative of cables. And then these are using brackets to hold it up from below instead of above, like you see here. So
I would be against that on a historic building without photographic documentation.
for
At
both,
one
or,
Yeah,
okay. Thank you.
Mary, did you say you would be against the brackets and the canopy as well?
I would.
Cables.
I think most
Yeah.
of our buildings had, there's a few exceptions where there would be photographic documentation because we have it for most of the buildings downtown, but on a historic building, no. On an infill building, maybe.
But, well, these look like infill buildings, not knowing any more than just what I'm looking at.
Yes,
Right.
yes. That's my intent for the purposes of this discussion, is that
So
these two.
and I'm fine with that. I think Mary's probably right. On a historic building, these might not be appropriate. But again, I have a bias against some of these awnings that are up too. So that's,
You're
but
right.
that's just, yeah, that's just personal opinion, but I think what I see in this picture on an infill building, new,
Yeah.
these look fine to me.
I agree.
I
And this
agree.
exists on the First Horizon building on the public square as well.
Yes. So just getting a sense, we don't have a lot of guidelines right now on canopies for new constructions. I wanted to get a sense of how you felt about these, and also in relation to historic buildings. So that's been really helpful. Our recommendation for canopies moving forward is that, you know, a canopy, and I refer to a canopy different than an awning, in that a canopy is structural and an awning is more of a metal tube frame that has canvas over it. But in this case, the guidelines that we are writing would suggest that perhaps one would size and place new canopies in locations that respect the design of the building, and that they be proportional with and complementary to nearby buildings and canopies, that they match historical equivalents, and they are painted muted colors that are complementary to the building and surrounding district. And that you, of course, keep your 8-foot minimum clearance between the sidewalk and the bottom of the canopy for code compliance.
And then I think we could add, they may be appropriate, a canopy may be appropriate for a historic building. I know the standard farm store has a structural canopy. So
Yes.
it might be appropriate on a historic building where there's a historic
Precedent,
precedent.
documentation. Oh, yeah, definitely. And this, I wanted to ask about, this is a historic building. Is this canopy addition appropriate for a historic building? You probably have already answered that question in what a couple of you have said, but I wanted to go ahead and show this one.
Off the top of my head, it just looks a little much to me. My eye's drawn more to those supports than it is to the canopy.
I think one of the things here that's not quite working is, and I'll go back here, this structural canopy is not appearing to cover any transoms or anything associated with the storefront.
Correct.
And then in this one, even though it appears that the storefront has been reworked, but the building's historic, you can tell that at least the upper part
Yes,
is,
yes.
that, these cables or, items emulative of cables are crossing over the or the transoms in a way that's detracting from the storefront appearance.
Hmm.
That's just my take on it.
I agree. It wouldn't be appropriate.
Agree.
Okay. Well, anyone else have any questions about any of the slides? Kelly, you have anything you want to add before we go?
Well, this is a great discussion. It gives us lots of guidance on how we work on the draft. So thank you all so much for your time.
Yes, thank you all. And I will likely see you in person again on May 10th at the Historic Zoning Commission meeting. We'll definitely keep you up to date on any decisions that are made by the state in relation to that.
Okay, if that's it, we need a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Thank you, Mary. Second,
Second.
Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Susan Besser,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Ken Scalf,
Aye.
Kathy Worthington,
Aye.
and Jim Roberts. Aye. Thanks to all of you. Thanks, Amanda and Kelly.
Thank you all.
Kelly.
Have a good
All
evening.
right.
See ya.